In this crooked game of power politics here in America, the Negro, namely the race problem, integration, civil rights issue, are all nothing but tools used by the whites who call themselves liberals against another group of whites who call themselves conservatives, either to get into power or to retain power. Among whites here in America, the political teams are no longer divided into Democrats and Republicans. The whites who are now struggling for control of the American political throne are divided into liberal and conservative camps. The white liberals from both parties cross party lines to work together toward the same goal, and white conservatives from both parties do likewise. The white liberal differs from the white conservative only in one way. The liberal is more deceitful, more hypocritical than the conservative. Both want power, but the white liberal is the one who has perfected the art of posing as the Negro's friend and benefactor. And by winning the friendship and support of the Negro, the white liberal is able to use the Negro as a pawn or a weapon in this political football game that is constantly raging between the white liberals and the white conservatives.
Over the years, many have highlighted this clip of Malcolm X speaking on how dangerous the white liberal is to the Black American. But what Malcolm X could have never foreseen coming on the horizon was the rise of the white progressive. Now, what separates the white progressive from the traditional white liberal, as Malcolm X knew them to be, is that the white progressive will actually parrot the talking points of Black radicals of the past while aligning themselves and or sympathizing with so-called Black radicals of the present. As it pertains to praising, quoting, and carrying on about Black leaders of the past, with white liberals, the buck stops with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whereas with white progressives, they'll often quote Fred Hampton, and they'll even go as far as to even champion the Black Liberation Army. But where the white liberal and the progressive have something in common is that if you, being Black, choose to follow behind them due to the false sense of camaraderie, you'll soon find that you're on a fool's errand, because though they may pretend to love Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Black Panther Party, they despise the people who they were originally fighting for. For the liberal and the progressive, piggybacking off of the history, pain, and struggle of Black America is simply a means to an end in order to push forward their own political agendas. And that's why you'll find that the moment you attempt to speak on issues in politics as it specifically pertains to its effect on the Black community and attempt to propose a solution and or policy that specifically benefits Black Americans to alleviate themselves from said issue, now all of a sudden you're being divisive. The white liberal will attempt to convince you that this isn't a Black issue, but it's a minority issue. It's a people of color and marginalized group issue. And the white progressive will attempt to convince you that this isn't an issue of race, but it's a class issue. It's not about racism, it's about classism. But what's even more interesting is that, to the credit of the white liberal, they actually do a very good job talking around Black issues, whereas the white progressive will become visibly upset when having to address Black issues. Now, what I want you to do is watch a few of these clips here of Bernie Sanders, a so-called progressive, and watch how he becomes visibly upset when asked about reparations for Black American descendants of slavery. During his 2020 presidential run, whenever Bernie Sanders was addressed with reparations, he would become visibly upset and would proceed to say, well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Well, what do you mean by that? In an extremely condescending tone.
Your position specifically on reparations. I asked the question because Elizabeth Warren, Julian Castro, they've indicated they want to support.
What does that mean? What do they mean? I'm not sure that anyone's very clear. What I've just said is that I think we must do everything that we can to address the massive level of disparity that exists in this country?
I'll tell you what they mean, because Elizabeth Warren has said black families have had a much steeper hill to climb. We need systematic structural changes to address that. Julian Castro has said, I have long thought that this country would be better off if we did find a way to do that, reparations.
Well, I agree with what Elizabeth said.
So you would support reparations?
But read what she said. What does that mean? She means, I think, I don't want to put words into her mouth, is what I said.
Why not support reparations then?
What do you mean by reparations?
By reparations for slave defenders.
I know, but what does that mean exactly?
Money.
Now, isn't Bernie Sanders a progressive? So then why is he so mad? Well, that's because these people really can't stand you. And what's happening now is that we're starting to see a pattern of white progressives becoming visibly upset when having to confront black issues of racism, white supremacy. And make no mistake, when you're talking about the legacy of white supremacy in America, you're talking about anti-black racism. Now, here's a question for you all. Have you ever seen a liberal talking to a majority Hispanic crowd about white supremacy? How about a majority LGBTQ crowd, or a majority AAPI crowd, or a majority white crowd? You never see that. The only time they bring up white supremacy is when they're either talking to a majority black crowd or a relatively mixed crowd with a decent amount of black people in it, to which they are touching on issues as it pertains to all groups. But in isolation, as it pertains to each group individually, the only time liberals speak about white supremacy is when they're speaking to a majority black audience, because legacy white supremacy in America is anti-black racism. Now, another thing that is very interesting is that ever since Cornel West announced that he was running for president of the United States, white progressives have been exposing themselves like crazy, revealing who they really are. And the most recent progressive to do this was Jimmy Dore. Recently, Jimmy Dore interviewed Cornel West, and what I want you to do is watch how he attempted to convince Cornel West not to speak about and address racism, white supremacy. And don't be fooled by Jimmy Dore's insertion of LGBTQ and trans rights into the discussion surrounding white supremacy. He merely brought that up as a buffer in an attempt to mask his own anti-black racism. Now, pay attention to how visibly upset Jimmy Dore gets when speaking on white supremacy, and even more importantly, pay attention to Jimmy Dore's body language as Cornel West stands up to Jimmy Dore's nonsense, refusing to back down off of white supremacy. As Cornel West is schooling, exposing, and embarrassing Jimmy Dore, Dore's body language has N-word with the hard ER written all over it.
So let me just say this. So the point of running a third-party campaign is to offer an alternative to the two major parties, to bring together disaffected members of those parties, along with independents and others who feel alienated from the political system as it exists. And the best way to do this is by running on economic issues that unite us, but which neither major party is willing to address because they're both beholden to the same powerful corporate interests. The Democratic Party long ago abandoned the working class in favor of beating the drum on cultural issues, and now that's all the Democrats have to run on. So if voters are looking for a party running on trans rights and calling Donald Trump and his supporters white supremacists, they can already vote for Democrats. The role of a third party is to focus not on the identity politics that divide us, but on core economic issues that unite us along class lines, like Christian Smalls did at Staten Island. Do you think he led with LGBTQ, trans rights, and white supremacy? Or do you think he organized along class lines? That's what we have to do. You have to organize, meet people where they are. So what is your plan to organize along class lines? Or are you going to keep talking about white supremacy and all those identity politics, which are there, not from the ground up, from the top down, to make sure we stay divided? What is your plan to organize along class lines?
Well, I appreciate again the clarity and candor of what you have to say. We have profound disagreements, brother. When I organized around white supremacy. I'm not making some utilitarian calculation. I'm speaking as a black man who comes out of a tradition that's been terrorized and traumatized by white elites. And that does not in any way mean it takes me away from class issues. Class issues are crucial. Class issues are fundamental. But it doesn't mean that I'm putting up with white supremacy. One of the problems is that you get too many folk who want to talk class, and can't say a mumbling word about white supremacy, police brutality. Can't say a mumbling word hardly. Or when they do say it, you call it identity politics as if it's not connected to class. I'm hitting these head on. I'm standing with the workers when it comes to strikes. I'm standing with the workers when it comes to greedy bosses. I'm standing with the workers when it comes to obsession with profits and the needs not in any way being satisfied. But I'll never for a minute be silent or not raising my voice in terms of vicious treatment of black people, indigenous people, gay brothers, lesbian sisters, or trans. It's not an either or. And that's where you and I have a deep, profound disappointment. So if I see, for example, if I watch your show and I notice you hardly say a mumbling word about white supremacy because it's some kind of identity politics and I'm against it, but I don't want to talk about it. I only want to talk about what people hold in common. Well, black people are not going to hold it in common if you don't say a word about white supremacy, but maybe some of your white friends will. So who are you talking about? You're talking about in common. Are you talking about just a majority or what, my dear brother? I will never, ever in a million years not talk about vicious legacies of white supremacy, male supremacy, homophobia, transphobia, and others. But class will always be very much at the center. What brings you and I together is what? Our fundamental solidarity with working classes, not just here, but around the world. But oftentimes when I hear about your show and you say, well, you know, these identity politics issues get in the way. No, it's 100%. Not getting in the way. They're not getting in the way.
100%. They're used by the Democrats. That's all they have to run on. And when you say that stuff, you just sound like a Democrat because that's all they have. So if
exactly
you
wrong.
need,
if the talk about the dignity of black people in the face of vicious white supremacy makes me sound like a Democrat, you got the wrong earplug.
Okay,
you're not listening clearly.
Throughout the entirety of this 45-minute interview, Jimmy Dore was attempting to scold, lecture, and talk down to Cornel West almost the entire time. And I personally have to applaud Cornel West because he handled himself exceptionally well against such an unwarranted attack by Jimmy Dore. But what this interview goes to show is that in the mind of the white progressive like Jimmy Dore, he doesn't care about how many degrees Cornel West has and how respected he is amongst his peers as an intellectual amongst intellectuals. No, in his eyes, Cornel West is still a boy. And in closing, when you get a chance to, do yourself a favor and go read the comment section in the most recent interview that Maj Touré did on Jimmy Dore's YouTube channel, in which Maj was making the case for reparations. Please do yourself a favor and go read the comments. And as you're reading those comments, remember, those are your so-called progressive allies and comrades. And with all that being said, that does it for today's video. So please make sure you hit the subscribe button as well as the bell notification next to the subscribe button so you can be notified whenever I release a new video. All social media links will be pinned in the comment section below. I also have a Telegram group now, so if you have Telegram, make sure to hit the link in the description box below as well as pin in the comment section to join my Telegram group. And also, please make sure you text tdhiphop to number 33222. That's tdhiphop to number 33222. That way you'll get a text notification whenever I release a new video, but it also serves as an insurance plan for myself, so in case YouTube ever gives me the axe, I'll be able to send you a direct link to where you can find me next. And last but certainly not least, for those of you who have a love and appreciation for the work that I put in on this channel, the number one way you can show your support is through Patreon. For only $3 a month, that will help put me in position to take TD Hip Hop Media off of YouTube. Remember, the goal is not to grow big on YouTube, but to grow independent of YouTube. And for those of you who have issues with joining Patreon, you can also hit the join button that's next to the subscribe button, and that way you can become an official channel member for as little as $3 a month as well. And lastly, if you haven't already, please make sure you join the emailing list. There is no way that I can go independent of YouTube if I cannot take the audience with me. And the link to that will be pinned in the comment section as well. Thank you for your time, and until the next video, peace.